proxies here today. So if we could start at my right and introduce yourself and maybe who you're a proxy for. And I guess we'd start over with Jason.
Hello. Jason Bannock with Indiana University.
Nate Nickel, Public Works, proxy for Adam Wason.
Becky Packer, NDOT. I am the proxy for Tony McClellan.
Hi, I'm Erica Tate. I'm with Federal Highway Administration.
Steve Wolin, City Council, here in substitution for Andy Ruff.
Nicholas Kappas, Bloomington Plan Commission, proxy for Brad Whistler.
I'm not sure, is this on? I'm Kent McDaniel, I'm not a proxy, I'm here for Bloomington Transit.
I'm Lisa Ridge. I'm not a proxy, and I'm Monroe County Highway Director.
I'm Terry Porter, Director of Planning and Transportation, and I'm proxy for Mayor Hamilton.
Cheryl Munson, Monroe County Council, proxy for Kate Wiltz.
Julie Thomas, Monroe County Commissioner.
Margaret Clemens, citizen appointee by the Monroe County Plan Commission.
Sarah Ryder-Bin, Citizens Advisory Committee Chair.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to amend the agenda. We have a presentation listed down under new business for IU Health Bloomington presentation. We would like to move that up to, would you like it under, let's say, reports from the MPO staff? Or you want it, do you want it there? Under communications from the chair. That way, then they don't have to sit through a lot of other agenda items that they might not want to.
Moved.
Okay.
Can we clarify that? That's after communications from the chair. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, I have a point of order and point of information. Is public comment to be included according to the bylaws of the MPO coordinating documents?
So to allow public comment after the IU Health presentation?
The old new business and the new business as per our charter and our bylaws.
Okay. And then I would ask if we do have questions and answers and concerns that we limit those to 5 minutes per person. And then that way we can give the IU Health presentation representative time to provide answers possibly at a later date. So if
Can I ask for clarification? I didn't quite hear that. Are we talking about public comment on a non-action item, which is opposed to our policy?
I'm just following the order of business in the bylaws, and old business allows for public comment, and new business allows for public comment, and I'd like to adhere by our bylaws.
Except she wants to move it before.
Well, I think, and maybe I wish we had a parliamentarian, we normally only allow public comment on action items, and there's no action items on old business, but there are a number of TIP amendments on new, so that would be appropriate for comments on those new items.
I appreciate your point of information, and I'd like to be referred to the bylaws in which it says that only action items allow for public comment.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that for all items that involve public comment today, that each individual member be limited to 5 minutes. I need a second.
Okay, all those in favor for the 2 amendments, did you want a roll call on that, or is it sufficient to do a?
I think did you just do a motion within the first motion? Because wasn't the first motion is to move IU Health earlier?
Oh, my apology. I'll withdraw the motion until.
And then the second motion, I just want to clarify, is it to have vote on all items under old business and new business, or is it specifically to add public comment time to IU Health?
Madam Chair, I'll withdraw my motion and allow Ms. Clements' motion to go forward first, and then we'll bring it up. If Ms. Clements would restate her motion?
I've just called for a point of order that we follow the bylaws, and for old business and new business, that public comment be allowed as per our bylaws.
But there's a motion on the floor to change the agenda. And that has to be addressed first because that's on the floor, and your point of comment point of
It's
order
not a
has
motion.
nothing to do with the agenda item that is up for motion. So can we please address the motion that's on the floor?
So we had a motion and we had a second for amending the agenda and moving up the IU Health presentation to under the topic of communications from the chair.
Call the question.
All those in favor for this amendment to the agenda, do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to item number 2, approval of the minutes from the June 14, 2019 meeting.
Move to approve.
I also have a point of friendly amendment. I think I've sent this out to the staff members in advance of the meeting, that the minutes be amended to include more of the context of the actual discourse that took place during the June 14th, 2019 meeting. I've transcribed the meeting.
Need a second.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
So I have a motion
Just a
and a
minute, there's
second.
a motion on the floor. I made a motion to approve the minutes.
I second the motion to approve the
Yes,
minutes.
thank you.
I didn't hear that. Sorry, Steve.
And now Ms. Clemens can amend.
There's an error,
Yeah.
and that's what she's pointing out.
That's in discussion.
Right.
Well, how can the minutes be voted on until we've had the discussion? That's a point of order.
Well, you can offer what you want to add at this point.
Okay, well, I would like to move that we amend the minutes to include a transcription from point 1 hour and 11 minutes from Cats TV until the end of the meeting, and I've submitted it to Pat Martin and Lisa Ridge, and the minutes are transcribed verbatim, so thank you. I move to amend the minutes. Do we have,
So we have a motion to amend the minutes from the June 14, 2019 meeting.
Steve has something to say.
I have a question, though. Since none of us have seen what those corrections are, then how can we vote on it? I mean, we could postpone the approval of the minutes to the next meeting and then get a copy, but short of that, I don't see how we can vote on it.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, I just received these about 15, 20 minutes ago, about 1 o'clock.
I would agree they weren't full and complete in our packet, so I just provided the extra detail, and if people need to review it, I have no objection to that.
I'm wondering what benefit we would have from having the full meeting transcribed.
I find it useful, and also the context is available that was deleted in the synopses given in our policy committee action packet.
Did it apply to what actions were taken at the meeting? On
Yes.
agenda items?
Yes.
On agenda items?
They're referred to in the minutes as presented to us in the packet, and so they do pertain to the order of business today.
So,
Madam Chair,
Can
I
I-
withdraw my motion to approve and request, if it's okay with my seconder, that we postpone approval of the minutes until we've all seen these.
Withdrawal of the motion is sufficient. That's effectively postponing, so
Thank you.
I agree to the withdrawal.
And so we have a motion and a second to table.
No,
The-
there's no motion.
So
at all.
just
You can go on to
withdrew
the next
that.
item.
Okay. So do we have a motion to table?
But there's no need.
Or
and
entertain-
There was never introduced. So
Okay,
You can just go on to the next item.
so we can move on to the next item?
The closest thing we have to Parliament.
I'm happy to serve. And a little
So we
tag
can
right
move
there.
on to the next item?
I think so.
All right, so communications from the chair. I have none myself, but this is where we have moved up the IU Health presentation. So who we have as a representative here for that presentation.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Shockney. I'm the president of the South Central Region for IU Health. Thank you for providing the opportunity for us to come before you. I know this isn't a precedent. This is maybe a precedent for us to come. But we have today with us Kyle Hardy, who is the Director of Design and Construction for the IU Health South Central Region, Hardik Shah from the American Structure Point, Jaleese, Police Chief of the Indiana University, and myself doing the presentation this afternoon. Our goal today is to provide you an overview of the great work that has been going on in and around the site of the new Regional Academic Health Center related to infrastructure and ensure you're aware of the understanding and planning and implementation going forward. The City of Bloomington, INDOT, Indiana University, and IU Health have been working collaboratively on this area of the project, as well as a large span of other developments related to this Regional Academic Health Center. IU Health is very thankful for the Mayor Hamilton, his administration, INDOT, and their collaboration, and our IU Health team that is keeping this project on time and on budget. You might know from all the trucks and cranes, we're building quite a big building out there on State Road 46, a new hospital, an outpatient center, an education facility like none other in southern Indiana. And with that, I will go to the next slide. Clicker.
If you don't mind just saying the slide.
Yep, we can do that. That's fine. It's great. Thank you. This facility will include the IU School of Nursing, the IU School of Social Work, and Speech and Hearing Pathology, and the School of Medicine that will be attached as part of this campus. The administrative and EMS support, which supports our current 6 locations, which I'll talk about here in a minute, will be moving off our current campus and will not be located on the campus of this site. It will be current locations and our North Park site of the acreage that we own currently. And this will disperse the traffic which normally travels to our existing hospital and parks those ambulances there. IU Health Bloomington this facility is 80,000 square foot larger than our current campus. So it is a much larger facility than what we have currently to incorporate this new model of outpatient, moving to outpatient care from inpatient. The facility will include over 80 tons of Indiana limestone from vendors in this region. The total project budget is $557 million. 503 of that is the IU Health project budget for our portion, and $54 million of that for the IU budget. And then the education building will complete prior to our completion and moving first patient in. The plan is for the IU schools to have their first patients in spring semester of 2021, starting January, and then the hospital first patient will go in the building November of 2021. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about emergency medical services. Dispatch from the EMS will take place in the community where we currently have locations, not from the Regional Academic Health Center, and where the calls. Currently, 78% of our EMS calls are 911 calls. The others are transfers and other types of calls. And so the strategy that we've employed here to date and will continue to employ is to have the EMS response units where those calls originate from, and the majority of those calls originate from, which 65% of those emergency responses are in those 2 zip codes closest to where our current facility is. So here are the 6, in yellow stars are the current 6 locations for our EMS and ambulance services. They are at State Road 46, North Curry Pike, West 1st Street, 7th Street, South Kennedy Drive, and South Patterson Drive. And then the new site will be the administrative building at North Park or Stone Carver Drive, and that will be not only a site for EMS, but also the administrative services of the EMS will be based out of that, as well as the maintenance facilities based in that area. The red arrow is where the RAHC will be. And then that's blue 7 is the new location for the maintenance and one of our response units. Next slide, please. So as there's been concern regarding trains and game day traffic and those types of things, and we have a plan, it's a plan that we have now currently. We deal with these trains and we deal with game day traffic currently and have for many years. And so this is the first train response plan. So when a call goes out and we need to respond, the path is take Indiana 46 to 3rd Street, follow 3rd Street to Smith Road to the underpass, and then the underpass to 46, and then to the hospital. If that is blocked or a struggle of any kind, then the second response plan is to take 3rd Street to I-69 South, take I-69 to the railroad underpass to 2nd Street, and then take 2nd Street to the new IU Health Hospital. So we are, our paths are taking into consideration all of the traffic. And just to reiterate, we deal with this every day here in Bloomington. This is not something new to us. It's just a new location and response, and that the EMS will be responding from the 7 different locations in the community that they have in previously and in the past. With that, I'm going to turn it over to American Structure Point and Hardik to talk about the road enhancements.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you again for the opportunity. I think with any development or any project, I think one of the core components is looking into what kind of traffic impacts it would have. So I think as part of this big hospital project that is going on, which is going to bring a lot of enhancement within the community, I think one thing that we were tasked to or hired to do for IU Health was to look into doing a traffic impact study to understand what kind of impacts it would have with this new regional academic health center facility, and then the corresponding recommendations or roadway improvements that would be needed because of the new access points that are going to be tied to the new campus. So I think as part of the overall traffic study, one of the core components was looking at the traffic forecast. And I think the way we do that is we look at the opening year of the development itself, and then also look at 10 years out. So we looked at the opening year 2021 and 2031. There were intersections that were identified as part of the access, as well as access to the new hospital campus. And signal warrant analysis were conducted for various different access points. And I think one specifically that is in discussion today is the State Road 46 and 14th Street, which is basically the new access point that goes into, currently ties into Range Road off of the proposed new campus location. So a signal was warranted based on the federal guidelines, as well as based on what is called the METCD requirements. And then the last thing is basically based on the signal warrant analysis that there is need for some added improvements, adding turn lanes at the intersection, and then obviously tying into the overall big picture plan for future as well, and looking at optimizing the signal timings. So this is, again, just giving a brief overview on the overall layout. I know the aerial background is dark enough, and with lights, I think it's difficult to see. But if you look at the area that is highlighted in blue or cyan color to the northeast, right, that's where the hospital is going, and that all the access roads going in there, those are all part of the IU Health network. We all know where the bypass is, so the State Road 46 bypass, which is shown in red or shown in pink, I think that's the one which is owned by INDOT, the Indiana Department of Transportation. To the east, the roadway that ties in, which is shown in red, the Range Road as well as the Pete Ellis Road, those are actually city-owned roadway segments to the limits that are shown here on the exhibit. And then west of the bypass, 10th Street currently is City of Bloomington right-of-way. And I think as we look at the new 14th Street that basically provides access to the hospital, again up north, that ties into Range Road, I think that entire roadway network is also City of Bloomington. And I think we are showing a potential future connection, which was, again, one of the components that ties into 14th Street, which is a Law Lane extension. Again, that project has not happened, but it's currently IU-owned property, but the desire or the intent would be it would be a city street down the road, so. Next slide. And this is again just a slide that zooms into the intersection at State Road 46 and 14th Street, which provides which is basically the primary access that ties into the hospital campus. I think, as I pointed out earlier, the improvements that are needed at this location is basically realigning the existing Range Road. I think many of you know that Range Road currently ties in as a stop control on the bypass. And if it stays in the current configuration, it's not going to work for the amount of traffic that is going to be attracted to the hospital. So that's where we are going to see the need for adding a traffic signal and need for adding turn lane, left turn and right turn lanes that goes into the newly realigned 14th Street that ties into the existing Range Road. Again, the signal is going to be timed as part of the coordination that NDOT has along the bypass, which is actually going to help with the progression, not only during the typical days, but also for the game day event situation. So I think that's a good segue to turn it over to Chief Lees.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk today about the game day and event day traffic that we have here at Indiana University. On any given game day on football, especially tomorrow, we have about 150 police officers, cadet officers per football game, not only as traffic, but also security and other functions as well. But pre-game and post-game, the majority are in the traffic, making sure that that all runs smoothly. We have a unified command at football games and other event days, including graduation, basketball, and other university events. That consists of police, fire, EMS, emergency management, security, event services, et cetera. So we're all in the same room and we are all working together. And with that, with the command and the tower that handles the traffic, we also look at and help each other during EMS, fire runs, et cetera. I'm in charge of command, and everything on game day comes through me. So I sit right next to the EMS counterpart. I actually sit between EMS and fire, and between those two functions, we make sure that the communication and the radio traffic is very, is flowing out to those in the field, and we usually never have any issues on the bypass during game day traffic because we always know when an ambulance is coming and going and what route they're going to take. The Indiana State Police are very instrumental because they handle all of that north end traffic pattern. And that is basically the whole bypass coming off of 69 to 3rd and College Mall. So we rely on the state police and they do an excellent job in that area. Other local agencies handle that south traffic pattern, which is 17th Street, all of 17th Street from Fee Lane to Kinzer Pike, and 10th Street to Jordan and Woodlawn. Next slide. So what I did was I added the pre and post-game traffic pattern. This is the pre-game traffic pattern that we put in place approximately 2 hours prior to kickoff. And as you can see, we do have some one-way streets and different configurations, but the bypass always remains 2 ways because we do have people coming and going in different lots, and we've definitely taken in consideration of the hospital being built. And when that was brought up, we usually keep the bypass moving, and that really isn't much of an issue on game day on that part of the bypass. And then for the post-game traffic, approximately the 4th quarter or so, depending on IU's football score, we put everybody back in the street. And again, we have one-way routes, and we put a traffic pattern in place to ensure that people can get in and out of the stadium effectively. But there again, the bypasses will also be, we don't run that into a one-way pattern, which will obviously help any type of emergency vehicles. And again, the key here is that our communication on the radio can help with ease get any ambulance or fire truck through that pattern because we know they're coming and we know what route they're going to take. So obviously, Indiana University, we plan to ensure all routes especially along the bypass, remain open near the facility during game days and special events. Again, that is not the hard part. The hard part is, a lot of times the traffic, 5 o'clock rush hour on the bypass, we've all been in it. But game day and traffic management, that runs very smoothly. And we also ensure emergency vehicles are never impeded to get into and or out of the facility. And obviously supplemented by these efforts from the different stakeholders that are here today to improve that and add that signal at the 14th Street bypass area, that really will help our the improvement of us getting the flow of traffic in and out of the area.
In summary, there's been a lot of good planning going on. We've been planning with this, starting with the traffic studies way before 2015. We have been in partnership and continue to be in partnership and discussion with all the constituents that you see here today presenting. We've started running scenarios regarding heavy traffic patterns, game day, working with EMS. So we're working through all of those and continue to do so to be completely ready for our November 2021 opening. And one of the things that we want to be sure, I was speaking with the mayor this week, and we want to advocate that any improvements that can be made in the future around that come toward the Regional Academic Health Center or any future developments in the future. We want to advocate for those as well and partner with not only with you but with our advocates here to move those as forward as we can and to before we open as possible. And so we're a partner in that. And one thing that the mayor had said to me, and I believe this with my whole heart, is, we all want the best for the city related to infrastructure, and we all want the best and will advocate and support for the best for the city. And our work together will ensure that. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you for that presentation. Questions from the board or comments?
Yeah, I just would like some clarification from one of you, and that's, as you've presented this to us, it makes us sound as if you plan on most ambulances entering in the 14th Street route. My impression was that they were going to be taking what we think of as Pete Ellis Range Road and entering the facility that way. Can you help me understand what the plan is?
So we can give you further clarification as we go, but yes, we're going to use the main roadways to be able to access the facility, the shortest route on main roads. So our concern is not so much the direction from where they're coming as much as are we using the main roads where the infrastructure is ready for them to go around traffic and get where they need to go and not utilize neighborhoods and other roads that are not, the infrastructure is not created for ambulances and other emergency vehicles to be taken.
So unlike your current system where you kind of go in the back door, you're going to be coming in the front door.
Well, front and back. So the way the is situated, if you see that greenish blue aqua line around the facility there, that's an internal road of the facility. So once they get in there, then they drive around the backside, and the emergency department is on that backside.
But it's how they enter that road is the real question.
They'll enter from either direction.
Either direction?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, depending on where they're coming from, picking that patient up.
May I speak? I think maybe and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you worried about that intersection at Pete Ellis Drive and Range Road and 46. Are there any improvements planned for that at this point? Because it's already a mess. Thank you.
So I think the intersection of 10th and Pete Ellis, there are improvements identified based on the current study. And we have been working closely with NDOT. So this is going to be an NDOT-led project based on the current funding. And again, don't have the exact dates, but it is out for February 2023 letting. So it is going through the feasibility study phase right now. There's a consultant that INDOT, Indiana Department of Transportation, has hired to study that site. There is a little bit of complexity because of federal property and some historic property involved at that site. So they are working on that right now and in the planning stages before they get into design development.
Thank you. May I follow up? INDOT, Steve, too. INDOT, do you have anything to add to that?
Hardick is correct. So it is already a approved project. It's for fiscal year 2023, as Hardick also mentioned. So we have been asked before to, if there's a possibility to move it up. Our difficulties are, what he's discussing is that we are going to add turn lanes at that intersection. And to add turn lanes, we have to buy property, but there's a state historic piece on one corner. The Federal Highway Post Office is on the other corner, and then IU is across the street. So to get through the environmental documents is kind of difficult. So we will try to move it as fast as we can, but there are no promises. So most likely it will stay in the 2023 fiscal year.
I have a follow-up question, if I might, right on the topic, if you don't mind. I appreciate what you're saying about the two corners. 2023 is really late considering what the date of the hospital opening is. Just to clarify, because I received the DES via email for that particular project, that is only the intersection. It does not go back to the west to the bypass. It does not go east. It is only those, it's turning lanes and the intersection, and that's it, correct?
Correct. At this time, yes, it is only the intersection, but when you discuss that intersection and you talk about adding turn lanes, a turn lane on left into Range or Pete Ellis is pretty extensive, so it is a lot further back than you think, so probably half the distance at least between 10th or the bypass and that intersection will actually get widened. We have placed in the program, but it's not a fully funded project to actually put in between 10th and Pete Ellis, but at this time, that is not funded for me to know what year it's going to be in.
Well, it was not on this topic. It was on, I wanted to ask about, to what extent is it a concern that the tracks cross the bypass? There was mention of the underpass at 10th Street. I didn't quite understand what the problem was from an EMS standpoint. Is it that, I think it was the first one, the first slide. So, I mean, is there some remedy that is proposed for this so that they don't have to go all the way around the tracks? I just don't understand the problem. Can someone speak to this? I don't know. I don't, who? Can someone speak to the, like, is this a problem that they're trying to solve by changing roads?
We don't own that, and I mean, that's not ours to solve. We've been doing this for many years, and we continue to do it that way. It hasn't impeded our ability to get patients where they need to be in a timely manner to get the care that they need. But as far as commenting on any infrastructure improvements or road improvements, that would not be our purview and wouldn't be in our comments.
So the reason I ask is because in the conversation here, the 10th Street underpass was mentioned, and I didn't understand, do EMS vehicles not fit under the underpass?
Yes, they can go under there.
So why was that mentioned? Why was that an issue at all?
When there's a train, it's just, there was some concern around what routes would we take if there's a train, and we have several routes we can take, and so that was we were just saying, here's what we do when there's a train.
Okay, so just to finish the question, is there anything about the 10th Street underpass that makes it more difficult to get to the new hospital?
Not any more so than it is today.
Because Mr. McDaniel, and I'm sure will agree that this has been a problem for Bloomington Transit for a long time. We can't get buses under the underpass. And the solution seems to be to connect Law Lane to 10th Street north of the underpass. And I don't know if that would have helped EMS at all as well.
I don't know that would help or hurt either one.
Is there anyone who has an opinion on that either way? If not, I'll, yeah.
Just to clarify, we can get buses under that, but we can't get electric buses or articulated buses.
We can't get anything except regular diesel buses underneath it.
I think I'll try to address maybe the concern that you were trying to bring up regarding the underpass. So
Yeah.
I think you're referring to the Law Lane, potentially the one that is shown in green, as being kind of like maybe an alternate that allows for the emergency vehicles to be able to utilize 10th Street, connect through Law Lane, and maybe continue going further north as it ties into the 14th Street at State Road 46, which is basically the primary access. So yes, absolutely, that will help. But as I mentioned before, this is again a conceptual idea that has been floated, and I think City of Bloomington has been involved in the discussions. But as far as a real project and funding associated with that, there hasn't been any
I see.
Information about that.
Yeah, I mean, the green path from the underpass to the bypass is a new idea for me, but I was just talking about the extension of Law Lane to connect with 10th Street, creating another form of connectivity that might benefit EMS. Thanks, that's all my question.
Yes, I have a question, please. I thought at the conclusion of the IU Health presentation, the Ambulance Advisory Board letter would be presented to the MPO. Would this be an appropriate time, since it discusses this intersection?
It's okay.
Is that okay? All right. So the chairman of the Ambulance Advisory Board, Milan Peace, is here to present that letter.
Lisa, have you got the letter?
I do.
I think disseminate it to the...
Pardon me?
Disseminate it to the rest of them?
Yeah,
Have it? Okay.
everybody got a
That's-
copy.
I don't want to start reading it and take more time on this, but basically, our concern was the Range Road 10th Street interchange. It's scheduled to be improved 1/10 of a mile east and west and north and south there, which is adding turn lanes. We would like to, if it's possible, to get there's a little less than 2/10 of a mile going west from the end of that 1/10 of a mile addition that goes back to the 45-46 bypass, to get that done at the same time, so that would help ensure that a secondary exit or egress, more importantly, for normal flow. Also, if something happens to block the flow at the main entrance, there's a traffic accident or...
Can you come closer to the mic? I'm having trouble hearing you, Mr. Peace. I can't hear you.
What, Steve?
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh.
Bring it towards you. Bring the mic towards you. But bring it towards your mouth.
Okay. Hear me? Anyway, the primary purpose of the letter was the Range Road 10th Street intersection. Just to make it really brief, we would just like to, if at all possible, to include the extension from there's a passing lane that goes east from the 45-46 bypass. It turns into an IU building, and then it drops down to 2 lanes with no berm onward to the Range Road intersection. If you would include that, I'm talking to NDOT here or the MPO, but primarily NDOT, I guess, in there to include that in that construction instead of going back later on and adding in another 19/100ths of a mile project in there. And that's it. Some of the Now, there's some train obstruction things, but I think it'll just add more confusion if I bring it up in a public meeting. So I'll probably talk to you later or talk to Brian about it. And there's some things that'll probably work smoother than that. Have any questions?
I would
just like to say that I really appreciated the leadership that was represented on this Monroe County Ambulance Advisory Board letter, and that you took the initiative to address bubbling up concerns around the community about emergency vehicle access to the hospital, and also current bottlenecks that we as citizens feel could thwart adequate access to the hospital at key times. And I think that this letter serves as an impetus for all of us to coordinate together. I've heard today here that IU Health has been at this since 2015, and here we are making major funding decisions that utilize our transportation network as a system, and that all involves you, and what we do also is of benefit to you. And rather than misspend or misallocate or fail to plan properly because of lack of coordination and lack of communication, I'm really glad you're here today to express to us for the first time what the plans are concerning the new IU hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Steve, none from you? You always have questions.
Why, thank you for that.
Just kidding. You don't have to say anything. Okay, if no one else has, thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I would suggest if anybody would want copies of the letters that's been presented on this topic, I'm sure the staff would be happy to make copies for anybody. I did want to mention that we also received a letter from Shelley Yoder, President of the Monroe County Council, that was also that this subject was part of their letter in support for helping in that area.
I just have a couple of comments, questions, if I might.
Sure.
Great. So I appreciate that emergency traffic is a priority, but has the hospital, has Structure Point looked at any, at the traffic pattern for visitors, guests, employees going out toward the east? Has there been, and you know, you had some traffic study numbers, but how are you differentiating, you know, which exit you think they're going to take and where you think they're driving?
Right. So, yeah, as part of traffic study, the model that we had put together, yes, we worked very closely with IU Health planning team to make sure that the staff and the visitor count based on their existing facility as well as based on what they are proposing and how it would be kind of like routed through the entire network that has been taken into account. Again, for lack of a better term, I would say there are gates on either side of the entire study area that we have identified, and then there are percentages that gets distributed that allows for the traffic that is coming in and out based on the type of traffic that is being attracted.
Okay. I would suggest that you also take into account the students that would now be there in addition to what's currently at Bloomington
Absolutely,
Hospital,
yeah,
right? I mean, it's going to be bigger in a way. The building's smaller footprint-wise, but it's going to be a bigger traffic flow than what's on Second Street.
Right, and that is taken into account, what we call it in the traffic engineering world, it's the trip generation. So basically the trip generation associated with the type of land use, which is the hospital in this case, and considering that this is an academic health center, it's going to have that student component as part of the trips.
Okay, good. So the other part of my question then is, have you worked with NDOT about specific intersections, and which ones have you discussed with them regarding not the bypass, but State Road 45, just the Pete Ellis, or were there other intersections you discussed with them?
Thank you for asking that question. I think one, it would have been a remiss if I would not have mentioned that the planning that we have been doing since 2015, I think there has been a lot of coordination happening with City of Bloomington, obviously IU Health, and NDOT has been a big partner, and we appreciate, I think, NDOT's help overall in helping out from the funding standpoint, because a lot of the roadways are owned by NDOT as well. Specific to your question, yes, 46 and 14th was the primary one, because that's the one that ties into the hospital. The other intersection that is being looked at is Pete Ellis and 10th Street. That's the one that NDOT already has a funded project later in the year. I think as far as if you're asking about the big intersection at 45 and 46, we had a lot of discussions about that intersection, and I think there was concern expressed by everyone in general about that intersection just being huge itself in the current configuration. And that was one of the reasons there was no intent to really add any additional traffic lanes, because I think that can lead to additional congestion. So again, it's called we call it the TDM, which is basically the Transportation Demand Management. So I think when you have the facility, you build roads, people are going to come use it. But I think the TDM, and again, the wayfinding within the site is going to help, at least from a staff and visitors perspective. They'll be using the right location so that we can limit the congestion through that big intersection.
Okay. Did you have any discussions with NDOT about moving east from the intersection of Pete Ellis and 45, east on 45? Did you have any discussions about State Road 45 east of the hospital, State Road 45 and Smith Road, and State Road 46 and Smith?
No, we did not have any discussion on further east of the study limits.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking that is because we received a DES on the Pete Ellis Range 45 piece the same day we received, or within a day we received State Road 46 and Smith on the east side. And I didn't know if there was a connection related to the hospital, so that's why I'm asking that.
Yeah.
For NDOT, if I might, I mean, I'm happy to hear that there's movement, and I do understand the historic nature of that corner. Does this replace what do you know, you might not know, but because you're not always here, the person here, but does this replace what we requested in June and later meetings when we've talked about how we wanted this whole area to be looked at from the bypass east to Russell Road, for example? Does this one intersection replace that request?
No, so for a little background, I don't know how much of you all understand how we propose projects. We have 4 asset teams, so we're kind of separate. We have projects that are proposed in pavement road, then we have bridges. Pete Ellis is a safety project, so we have a lot of crashes, so that's actually how it was proposed and funded. What you, kind of what you're asking for is a mobility project, a little different. So mobility projects are extremely large. When you go against the whole entire state, it can be sometimes a little difficult to get them funded. So we do have a proposed project, as I said, from 10th to Pete Ellis. It's not funded yet. It's not stating it won't be funded. It's just that it's not there. We are also, for this call, which is in January, which we call our 2025 call, we plan to propose a project that will go out to Russell Road. So at least from Pete Ellis to Russell, there's no reason for us to do the 10th to Pete Ellis because we've already asked for that project. So there's a separate, we're going to propose a mobility project for it. And then I believe there's a safety project that's being proposed that's a little separate that would be like sidewalks and pedestrian facilities.
Okay. So the Grandview area? Yeah. Okay.
And again,
that's earlier.
They're all being proposed for those 2 are being proposed for 2025 fiscal year. Okay. And when we talk about Pete Ellis, I know it sounds like it's a long way out when I say fiscal year 23, but you also need to understand our fiscal year starts July 2022, so a little different when you talk that.
Right. I guess the concern then is and I appreciate that information because we never had that kind of timing information before, so I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. So my concern then is how do we ever address the intersection of the bypass and 10th east all the way to where this new intersection will hopefully be done? Because that intersection project does not extend all the way back west to the bypass. So how does that block it done? Because you have 2 turn lanes going down to 1 very quickly. To me, that's a safety issue because I see a lot of near misses every time I'm there, but.
So we've looked at it many times. My group is, I'm over the asset engineers. So we've looked at different scenarios of actually, blocking that turn lane, but then it backs up people on 40s. On the bypass, we've looked at how do we make that lane come in a little bit better. As I said, that is a proposed project, so we're hoping that it'll get funded this time, and if all would go well, that maybe it gets tied to the Pete Ellis, because we know you would hate for us to come in and do Pete Ellis and then the next year come in and do that piece. Plus, it saves us a lot of MOT when we do all as combined. So I would state that I believe that will be addressed. I just can't tell you the date because I don't know it.
Okay.
We are working hard to get that worked out.
Can I provide a brief comment supporting that? So I think she's absolutely right. The intersection at 10th and Pete Ellis, that's mainly safety driven. And I know there was a concern about obviously congestion through that area and what happens in between. And one thing, and this is again, I'm a traffic engineer, so I just got excited to at least put a few more cents on this. Many of you have driven through that intersection in the current configuration, and you know that depending on where you're coming from, it's all over the place. There are turn lanes, there are existing through lanes where there is no left turn lane, and I think people have to make a left turn approaching, basically that impedes the flow of traffic as well. I think as we add the turn lanes as part of the intersection improvement project that INDOT is talking about, it will improve the overall flow through that segment. But I think your point is valid about what happens in between, and I'm pretty sure the feasibility study is actually taking that into consideration right now. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Rick, stand back up. So I
It's only
appreciate
Friday the
that you've been
13th.
addressing automobile traffic and ambulances.
Right.
I'd like to know about the multimodal effects in this area and whether we've addressed buses, bicycles, and pedestrians traveling in that whole campus area and how that's being addressed.
Yeah, so I think from a multimodal perspective, we did take into account the existing transit that is in the area. As far as specific, I know there are bus routes that are identified that will have stop going off of 14th Street. So that has been coordinated. As far as the sidewalk connectivity and some of those infrastructure elements are concerned, those are being talked and discussed with City of Bloomington, and they are being incorporated as part of the new infrastructure that is going in with the hospital project. As far as the existing segment of 10th Street or 45, there has not been anything, mainly because it's also the road that is controlled by INDOT, and I think there is no sidewalk connectivity that is throughout the entire segment. So that is probably the only one that is kind of like the missing piece.
Well, yeah, because I'm also talking about actually onto campus. I mean, we have, for instance, at 10th and the bypass, we have a large building, and the only way that someone in a wheelchair can get off the bus and into that building is to go down the road, go back up the hill, over into the building. There is no easy access. And I want to make sure that on campus that we have pure multimodal access for all beings.
It is taken into account on the existing design. That has been taken into account, the ADA requirements through the sidewalk and the bike or the path connectivities. Those are all taken into account.
But are we going to accessibility and not just ADA standards?
Right. Yes.
They're
the
different.
PROAG, yes, I understand that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure who this question should be for. I wanted to tag on to Sarah's comment that we do anticipate, in fact, we're continually getting requests, new development in this area. So we anticipate the population near the new hospital to increase. I don't know by how many, but I would imagine hundreds of units. Have you considered that as part of your infrastructure design, is that there will be so many more people in the area when we look at pedestrian friendly and that sort of thing? And that's probably future planning as well.
So I think as part of specific to the traffic impact study, which helps identify the mobility aspect on the overall campus network, that particular component was not linked directly with the traffic impact study. But I think as part of the overall planning that has been going on with the architecture team that is working on IU Health project, yes, that has been taken into account as far as I know.
Great. So I just have one other question. And again, I'm not sure who to answer.
I'll just stand here.
Well, yeah, you might as well. I'm intrigued by the scenario planning that you've been discussing, and I'd be interested to know what is your worst case scenario that you've established for yourself, assuming that the hospital is in that location, you have your stations set up, and so what is the worst case scenario that you've run through, and how have you handled it?
So we have not run through worst case scenario as far. I'm assuming if you're talking traffic,
Yes.
we've not. Those are the traffic studies, but from a worst case scenario, we do disaster planning on a regular basis, and we do it in conjunction with the county, city, and others. So if there were ever something that occurred in the community or surrounding community that we needed to respond to, we are developing those plans currently. So where would we set up our alternative plans? Where would we set up response areas? Much like the IU Police and our EMS and others have established what happens during a ball game or some activity on campus if an event occurs, God forbid, that we have a plan to enact at that point. So as we are developing and moving toward that 2021 November date, we are changing all of our response, which would include traffic patterns, but all of the response where we would set up and how we would set up. In the planning and construction, actually we have two separate electrical feeds and utility feeds. We have our own central energy plant, and so we are constructing the site to be self-sufficient, to be able to care for patients no matter what happens in the community, even down to the limestone and the windows and all of that. We've sent off to a lab, kind of like a NASA lab, and they've ran it through hurricane tests and F5 tornado tests and those kinds of things. So yes, all of that is going into the planning and design of the facility.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a question. Can I ask about traffic counts on 10th Street? What are traffic counts west and east of Pete Ellis Drive now?
So I think from an ADT, which is the daily traffic volume perspective, we are, as we get close to 45 and 46, you're looking at 35,000 vehicles. That actually goes just east-west. But if you're talking about counts east of Pete Ellis, I'll have to look back into the exact count information, but I would say it's in the 15 to 20,000 range.
Okay. 35,000 cars a day are using Pete Ellis Drive between the bypass?
No, not Pete Ellis Drive. It's at 45 and the bypass.
At that corner?
Right.
I mean, even so, that's the highest number I've ever heard for counts at, no number I've ever seen goes above 30. How recent are those numbers?
We collected the data in 2015 when we did the study, 2015-16 when we actually were going through the study. So.
And how much more do you think traffic will increase as a result of the hospital being there?
We looked into the growth patterns other than obviously the shift in traffic that will be happening with the existing facility and trickling through. I think the growth that was taken into account was under 1%.
Was how much?
Under 1% as far as the background growth is concerned.
Okay, so we're not talking about these improvements or improvements on 10th Street in particular, specifically because we're concerned about the hospital, are we?
Not necessarily. I think it's actually a combination of all the trips that are going to be attracted through that area. And I think, as I mentioned before, as part of the traffic model, it's not just one route that is being taken to get to the access point. Depending on where you're coming from and the proximity of the other roadway connectivity, I think it does take that into account in the overall modeling.
So is the improvement at 10th and Pete Ellis also going to result in an increase in capacity in the intersection?
Yes.
So what will from what to what roughly?
I would say it would increase the overall, just for the overall total intersection capacity, I think it will increase it to 30,000 vehicles that can get through the entire intersection.
So it will be roughly as big and capacious as the 45 in the bypass, as 10th in the bypass.
Well, 45 and bypass carries more traffic. I think when I mentioned 35, I'm just referring only to the traffic that is in the proximity of the 46 and 45 bypass. If we talk about the intersection with all 4 approaches, you're looking at the counts being a little bit more than that. And we can verify the exact, or I can tell you the exact count based on the data that we had in the traffic study.
Well, last question then. If the capacity of 10th and Pete Ellis is planned to be increased to roughly 30,000 cars a day, what's the current capacity, not actual traffic, but capacity at 10th and the bypass?
10th and bypass?
Yeah, what's the capacity of traffic there?
I would say the current, again, this is, I'll have to look at the exact numbers, but I would say the current capacity based on the number of lanes that are out there on the bypass as well as 45, you're looking at 50,000, north of 50,000, so 50,000 plus.
Okay, that gives me a sense of scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board or questions?
I guess I'm just curious, it's currently, would you say that 10th and the bypass is at level B, C? What level of service are we getting now? And same thing for 10th and Ellis, Pete Ellis?
So 10th and Pete Ellis, so it's not just a capacity issue. I think it's also a safety issue because of not having dedicated left turn lanes.
I realize that, but I'm just asking level of service.
Level of service existing at 10th and Pete Ellis, it's a failure condition, so you're looking at the later grades. Again, I'll have to verify the letter. It's probably E or F. And at 45 and bypass, you're looking at the degrading level of service as well. I think that there is already congestion that is out there at 45 and bypass.
Steve?
Yeah, one more question about 10th and Pete Ellis. Does it have to have dedicated right turn lanes? Couldn't dedicated lefts be enough to satisfy the need for now?
At 10th and Pete Ellis?
Yeah.
I think the left turns are definitely, left turns are definitely needed. I think left turns really create the conflicting movements, which creates unsafe situations. So if we can separate out the left turn phase, that does help out. I believe there is one location, and again, this is something that I can verify from the traffic study. There is one location where one approach where we are looking at having a dedicated right turn lane based on the current existing right turn volume that is out there. So again, we have to look into the warrants for when do you need an exclusive turn lane based on the federal guidelines and the MATCD requirements, and we justified based.
It's only the right turn lane that I'm concerned about. I can see dedicated lefts, but yeah, that's all.
Right, and I think that's based on the existing. It's not driven based on the future volume that is being attracted. It's based on the existing. I believe it's the westbound right turn from 10th that goes on to Range, North Range Road.
That's the only one that's the only.
I believe so. That's the only one that actually requires the right turn lane.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'll stand here for a few more minutes before.
Thank you. Any more questions from the board? Seeing none. We want to thank you so much for the presentation, everybody taking their time out of their busy schedules to come and address the board and answer their questions. I think there was a lot answered today that we didn't have information of before. We want to thank NDOT for keeping moving to try and get more funding for that area and different projects. And I did notice there is a call for projects coming out in November that, yep. And so that's awesome news, so thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Additional questions, where should we send them?
Patrick, do you want additional questions sent to you? If anybody has additional questions, and then you can maybe compile a list of questions?
Please, and then what we will do is forward those to the Indiana Department of Transportation, since it's their facilities, and anything directly related to the facility itself will direct to an appropriate representative at IU Health.
Thank you. And if you don't know Patrick's email address, we'd be happy to give it to you.
It's on the World Wide Web.
All right, moving on. Reports from officers and/or committees. Citizens Advisory Committee.
Citizens Advisory Committee met. We recommended approval of the TIP amendments that you will see on the schedule today, our agenda, and we discussed at length the bylaw amendments, and we requested that the individuals on the committee present any of their own proposed amendments, and you will see some of that in the current bylaws that you are reading in today's agenda.
Thank you. Comments from the Technical Advisory Committee.
Paul Satterley, Vice Chair. We met on August 28th for the Technical Advisory Committee, and we voted to recommend to the Policy Committee approval of the TIP amendments for the INDOT projects, the 8 INDOT projects, as well as the Monroe County Karst Farm Greenway project. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Moving on to reports from the MPO staff, fiscal year 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program.
The reason that's on there is that the last time the board met in June, the Transportation Improvement Program had not been approved. And since that time, the end of June, all projects were approved and all projects were placed within the INSTIP, the Indiana's Department of Transportation Improvement Program. And all of those are listed online too. So everything that this board approved was approved and has been funded, and the Transportation Improvement Program meets full fiscal constraint as required under federal guidelines.
Great. Thank you to the staff for getting that all in on time and getting it approved. Fiscal year 2019 annual listing of obligated projects.
I'm sorry, we're switching hands here.
You're fine.
Okay. Under a requirement of the Federal Highway Administration in cooperation with the Indiana Department of Transportation, we are obligated to report what are called the annual list of obligated projects. What was included in your packet and compiled, well, the raw data information was given to us, the staff put it into a tabular format, which is readable for what I would call the general public or civilians. And in this, it's organized in several different ways. I mean, the first one is the Indiana Department of Transportation projects, and this list is here in the blue. The second list of projects are the City of Bloomington and the MPO obligated projects, which were included last year in fiscal year 19. And then the last list is Monroe County. Yeah, here we go. Stroll over Monroe County. And there was an Ellettsville project in here, but the Ellettsville project was a 0-0 type project, so it is included in there. I'm sorry, yeah, Ellettsville STP project was included in there, was an old 0-0 project, and that was an old project that was taken out. That was a 03 project, so it was a 2003 project. And then tabular summaries are given for each one of those individual entities. And if you have any questions on any of these, please let us know. All we did was compile the data.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Comments? Cheryl?
I do have a question. Back to the blue table, please. Close to the bottom. State Road 37, Dillman Road to I-69. And I had a chance to speak with Mr. Martin today. And is this the same project where construction is ongoing presently?
I believe it is, yes.
It says 00, and I just don't understand that.
That means that all of the money had been obligated for the project previously. Now, this was for construction and construction engineering. If that's undergoing construction right now, I can't explain why this is 00, other than the fact that they may be, well, Becky, perhaps, do you know anything about this?
Don't know about this one.
I will need to do additional research for you.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, the number they gave me was straight out of their financial dump.
Right.
So the 00 is exactly what they gave me.
So the reason I called Mr. Martin was that I wanted some information about today's meeting, but I brought up this project because there was a major safety concern. And this is not primarily INDOT's problem, but their contractor, as I understand it. But Dillman Road crosses State Road 37, and State Road 37 was changed for construction to being two-way traffic on the northbound lane. And there was no sign on Dillman Road warning people about this. Maybe they could have seen the two-way traffic during the daytime, but at night, when people are looking to cross Dillman Road, especially headed west across State Road 37, they are looking one way, but not the other way, because it's usually a one-way lane. And Mr. Martin gave me a phone number that anybody can call to report a problem that is a major safety concern with an INDOT project. And I would like more publicity for the MPO region about this phone number so that people know how to contact INDOT, because I would have pulled over and I would have called INDOT at 10 o'clock at night.
The only thing I would add to that is the Indiana Department of Transportation has a 24-hour hotline, and that 24-hour customer hotline, it also connects to the state police, and if it's involving a serious issue of some type or another. It also connects to motor vehicles if it's a motor vehicle issue of some type or another too. But the website is INDOT4U, and that's the number 4 and the letter U. We euphemistically call it INDOT for IU, but that's not the correct name. It's INDOT4U. And this is a toll-free number. Like I said, it's monitored 24 hours a day. All of the complaints that I receive regarding Indiana Department of Transportation facilities under their jurisdiction, I pass those along to INDOT4U. All of those I either call in or I upload. For example, the letters that we received from the ambulance board, letter received from the county council, those will be uploaded to the INDOT4U website after this meeting. A letter we had previously received from the Monroe County Commissioners, that was also uploaded through the INDOT4U website. And then we always, if it's a detailed letter, we always request a detailed technical response.
What's the phone
Just
number?
taking up on that, is that 800?
I believe it's an 855 number.
It's 855 INDOT4U.
INDOT4U.
INDOT4U, yes.
Thank you.
They're very responsive.
Okay, moving on. Policy Committee meeting review.
Hi, thanks for waiting for the swap. Beth Rosenbarger here on behalf of MPO. And basically, we know there were some things that happened in the last meeting. I sent out a memo that didn't have 100% accurate information, so I wanted to follow up on some of that and just kind of recap some things that happened in order for us to go forward and make some changes. So first, public comment. In the memo I sent, I incorrectly stated that the public comment was not on the agenda at the June meeting, and it was. So my apologies on that. It did say it on the agenda. In general public comment for items not on the agenda, as we would call it, is not currently included on policy committee agendas, but it can be added. It could be added as a standing item, and we want to check in with the policy committee if they would like to do that. And that is one reason we are looking into the bylaws to also make changes. So in the bylaws for the MPO and under the policy committee, it does outline specific things that we put on every policy committee agenda. Something doesn't have to be on there in order to be included, but if you want it included at every meeting, it would help and just add transparency in order to just put it on there. So that could be an amendment to the bylaws to have it listed there. Additionally, you could do a motion and add it on any agenda that policy committee members would like it added on as well, if you would like to do that before it is changed in the bylaws or on an ad hoc basis. In general, the standards for how public comment works, I would say we do have a number of officials, and this policy committee specifically are people who are usually on other boards that are similar and function similarly. So similar to kind of the city and county plan commission and similar to county commissioners and city council, public comment generally functions that someone makes their comment in their entirety. And then there is the option for the body to take in those questions at the end of it and redirect them towards staff if that is what they would like to happen. If they think staff are the appropriate venue to answer those questions, or if you would want to make a motion or a comment to direct it to a different board. And that would be great. So usually on those other bodies and generally recommended, we don't do question and answer within public comment. And I was told that's for First Amendment reasons. Generally, it's recommended that you do time limits, but again, that could be up to the body itself. So as the other meetings have it, we already have it in the bylaws currently. If an item is being voted on, it says people can comment for up to 5 minutes. If you add general public comment to an agenda, usually there is an overall cap on the total public comment, and the body might move to have limited comment per individual. And again, I said if at any time policy committee members want to add public comment where it's not added, you can make a motion and add it to the agenda that day too. So currently, and we don't have to deal with it right this second as there is a bylaws item next, but we would be asking the policy committee if you all would like general public comment as a standing item on the agendas, and where on the agenda potentially you would want it. And those are items we'll be asking for feedback on. At the last policy committee meeting, there were 2 votes that occurred. The motions and votes were made, and the 2 items were voted on. They were made kind of quickly, that's fine, but during a public comment. And the votes were done as voice votes. And both in the meeting were stated as passing. And now, after we've reviewed the minutes, it would appear that actually neither item did pass. This is hard to determine on the fly sometimes when we're doing voice votes. in the bylaws for the, for the MPO, it states that all votes are voice votes unless a roll call vote is requested by a member of the committee. We would like to ask, and I think you all would be fine with it, but if staff can also make that request as needed as well. And just to clarify sometimes so we can more accurately and quickly keep track of how votes are going. So we are circling back on both of the items that were voted on. Obviously, one of them was, if you remember, I know we have a lot of proxies, to have a presentation and request that IU Health be here. That one has happened, and that was great. And the second request that was motioned and voted on is in reference to a reply letter to NDOT. As we said, it didn't pass when we look in the minutes. And so we've added it to the agenda and would like to discuss and ask for more clarification and direction from the policy committee on that. So right now, that has just been added to the agenda today. We will ask for more clarification and ask for a recommended next step. I note actually in the agenda, there is not an asterisk next to it, but if you want to do a vote on that, we could do a vote on whatever recommendation the committee would like to make. And then also we could ask that you add public comment to that item on the agenda today. Next up is an update on the bylaws, and some of these items will be, questioned at that time. And those are my updates for now. Questions?
Question.
Do you mean that roll call vote is not the standard for the MPO?
Correct.
It's voice vote? Wow. Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned that this item of readdressing this letter that was requested was on the agenda. Where is that on the agenda? Is that what you call State Road 45 follow-up?
Yes. So I guess we could have labeled it differently, but yes.
I wasn't at that last meeting. I was on my way to the airport. When I looked at this, I didn't know what that meant. So does that qualify as public comment that we have an action item on the agenda when nobody knows what it is?
I was going to say, we communicate with the Indiana Department of Transportation via email. So we did do a follow-up thank you with the Indiana Department of Transportation via email for the letter that was received from the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation to the Monroe County Commissioners.
But that didn't address my question. My question was, how is the public supposed to know that we're taking an action on an item when that's what they see if they look at the agenda?
Sure, fair question. Do you mean because of how it's titled or because it's not noticed for a vote? Or both?
Both.
Okay. I don't know. And I guess because we were making it as a follow-up item from the last meeting, it's not necessarily something specific. Staff would say there was a vote taken on a motion that didn't pass. So should we have named it the exact motion from the last meeting that didn't pass? Or I don't know. I mean, I guess we're open to suggestions, and I'm sorry for the confusion.
What was the motion again?
For staff to take action at the request of the MPO to coordinate with other agencies issues surrounding the hospital and also the 10th Street State Road 45 corridor. And staff, although they've been asked to coordinate, their response is to invalidate our vote.
Okay, so this is a complicated motion that would normally be reduced to writing. Is it in writing somewhere?
Yes, I provided it in, from the minutes that were submitted today and that have been tabled for next meeting.
Okay, so in other words, the motion, I mean, normally we'd call that a resolution or an ordinance, but I guess it's not, I don't know. All I know is that you would have to reintroduce it, like if it didn't pass. You need a motion in a second, wouldn't you?
If I might. First of all, I was there and I understood that it passed. I have not seen anything that says it hasn't until I saw it in this packet or the Q&A. The other thing I do want to point out, just for clarity's sake, is that it's better to be careful in these situations and not assume that all plan commissions and our Board of Commissioners operate the way that you outlined. We don't. We do talk to our folks who come in, because if we need information, we're not going to wait a week and we're not going to have them come back. We're going to ask them questions. So please don't make assumptions about how we operate, because it's not accurate.
I'm sorry that was stated as an assumption. This was based on my experience attending those meetings in the past. So I was unaware. Sometimes, apparently, there are back and forth question and answers.
Yeah, this does not comport with the way I've ever seen any other meeting conducted, that usually one person speaks at a time, and there's a period for comment, then a period for debate, and a period for a vote. So I don't understand what's happening, but all I can tell is it was not determined that a vote on the motion carried at the last meeting. I don't even really understand the motion, honestly.
I also had a comment just to voice my concern about motions and actions being directed toward the MPO staff that are not also brought to the attention of the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. That's my understanding of how the agenda is determined. Again, we seem to be making some right turns, left turns here, trying to maybe turn a more, what has been an informal meeting into a formal meeting. But I did want to make the comment that I think that's something that we should keep very much in mind, that we have 3 committees that compose the MPO. And my understanding is that all 3 vet what goes on the agenda for the policy committee, that the Citizens Advisory Committee, and then you can shake your head, but I've been looking at the bylaws, so I guess there really is some confusion, and perhaps we need a committee to study the bylaws rather than hash them out all here when it's already 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon.
Personally, I would suggest that we don't take any action on this today, because I'm at a loss too. I don't understand exactly what's going on. I wasn't at that last meeting, as I mentioned, and I haven't seen a copy of the letter either. Is it in the package? The letter that was proposed to send to NDOT? It's a big package, and I missed it if it's in there. But if it comes to a vote, I'll abstain, because I'm not going to vote on something I haven't seen.
So I think the motion at the time was just for the staff, and correct me if I'm wrong, was for the staff to write a letter on behalf of the MPO Policy Committee, just in support of a project, and sent to NDOT. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I remember it wasn't a roll call vote, but I also don't recall anybody opposing or voting against doing that support letter.
Staff understood it as a request.
Pardon?
And staff understood it as a request, and what we did was, on that Friday, we started preparing a letter on Monday. Following Tuesday, we received a letter from the Monroe County Commissioners in the afternoon, that Tuesday afternoon. That Wednesday morning, we uploaded the letter, the Monroe County Commissioner's letter, to the Department of Transportation with a transmission from the staff. It wasn't a letter, it was an email. It was an email to them saying that this deserved serious technical consideration by the Department of Transportation. And then we also did a follow-up call. We did several follow-up calls to the Department of Transportation to ensure that point by point, all the concerns identified by the Monroe County Commissioners were answered. And to the best of my knowledge, they were. So and then after receipt of that letter from the Commissioner's office, the staff then sent an email to the Department of Transportation thanking them for the consideration that they gave us, they gave to the Monroe County Commissioners, and for answering all of the questions point by point.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Are we discussing item 7C right now? And have we skipped ahead of things?
I assume we are, yes,
Okay.
yeah,
So, but we still have to discuss 7B, is that correct?
yes, yes. I think the.
Because we did not
The
move-
C and D up under 5C and D probably should have also included
I would simply ask that
item
we stick to regular
7C.
order here, yeah.
Right. Julie, Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something that hopefully will clarify things and not force us to relitigate the past, because there's no point in doing it. There's no need to send a letter at this moment, because the questions that were raised in the letter the county commissioner sent have been answered. We are going to get the exact same letter back from NDOT, so I'm not sure why we're even talking about it anymore. So maybe that'll help a little bit.
Okay. Cheryl?
Yes. It's been several years since I was serving on the MPO, but I remember that there were communications from the MPO at that time, from the policy committee, excuse me. And having the staff forward a letter from the commissioners, which was brought up at an MPO meeting, I don't see as being the same thing as a communication from the policy committee. I see them being two different things.
Just, as chairwoman, I guess, of this board, if there were some bylaws broken, it was brought to my attention maybe a month or so after those meetings that I had conducted the meeting and that some of the bylaws were broken. I apologize for that, but I don't apologize for supporting a safety issue. And listening to the public and moving forward and just asking for a support letter. I don't see any harm in that. If I did break a bylaw, I broke a bylaw, but I still support a project, and I won't apologize for asking staff to write a support letter.
Thank you. Well said.
Thank you.
To get back to Steve's point, since we're still on item 7.
7C apparently, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we approve all of the 8 NDOT and the Monroe County project.
So we're going to 7B now, is that it?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
7A was already done.
And
We
number
moved
2
that up.
down there, the Monroe County, I'd like to move that we
We're not
pass
on
all those.
7B.
Second?
But we're not on 7B.
Pardon me?
We don't have the tip amendments before us, as far as I can tell. And 7B on my agenda.
I think they're in the package.
Back in the back?
Yeah, I just saw them way back at the back.
I think Sarah was saying we haven't moved on from item 5C.
Yeah,
Is that?
that was my understanding.
We
that
can't.
We were still at 5C.
D right now.
All I
Yeah,
know
we
is
haven't
that
moved into
it turned
7.
into a discussion of 7C, so
No.
They were very
happy to
related.
go back to whatever the next thing is.
Because we haven't moved on to 5C or 5D. We're still at staff.
With one of the questions about the meeting items, I'd like to say that the bylaws, according to how I read them, and of course, they might be subject to interpretation by the way they're written, but both old business and new business demand public comment. They demand on every agenda public comment.
Point of order,
And if
Madam
the
Chair.
agenda is to be changed,
I don't know what
that
we're
it has to
talking
be
about.
by unanimous vote.
Are we on 5C? Is this still discussion of 5C? Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you restate that, Ms.
That
Clemens?
according to the MPO bylaws, Section 2.6, Order of Business, items 6 and 7, old business and new business, demand and require public comment. And that whenever the public comment would be overridden, it would demand unanimous vote of the serving committee members and those present. That's my understanding of reading 2.6, Order of Business for the Policy Committee.
I think, my understanding is that for old and new business, it says it requires public comment on any action being voted on.
It doesn't say it. It says public comment prior to vote. And if there's no vote, there still would be public comment. is my reading of that.
Can you read the whole sentence, please?
It says, "Public comment prior to vote," in parentheses, "limited to 5 minutes per speaker." So if there's no vote.
The whole sentence, please.
That is the full sentence.
But it says prior to vote would imply that there is some action that is before the body that would require a vote.
I don't see that. I mean, if we're talking about old business that does not require a vote, I would still see that the public comment would be welcome by us, because that's what we do. We welcome public comment.
Can I add a note?
Yes.
So staff does read it as it is public comment that happens after there's an agenda item that's being voted on. It gets presented, discussed by the body, questions to staff, and then public comment before the vote on that item. So some items can be old business or new business without having a vote on them. And per this, we read it as they don't require public comment. That doesn't mean there could be an option that the committee either changes that language or votes to say we still want public comment on this item, even though there won't be a vote.
Well, then it should say prior to action item or something like that, because.
If the lady would like to make a motion before a certain item on the agenda, but I think staff has made it pretty clear that there has to be a vote pending for public comment to be required. If we would like to have public comment on an item that does not have a vote, that would require a motion and approval by the body in that moment. So if you'd like to make that motion before the item that you want comment on, now would be that would be the time to do it.
I would submit that an action item requires a vote, but if you're voting on something, that constitutes an action item.
But if you're discussing something and the public is present and wishes to speak.
So I know how we work on Wednesdays when the city council's in session. We have a public comment period before and after the bulk of the meeting for items that are on the agenda. Public comment is had only on an item that has a vote. This is exactly the way that I read the bylaws, that I hear the bylaws that you read now.
One related note would be, and then I'm not sure if I'm segueing, I'm sorry, into the next agenda item. Staff would be interested in hiring an attorney to help with some of the bylaw updates. So we think some of this can get complicated, and there's a lot happening, or to have a parliamentarian, but staff has knowledge in transportation planning. There are a lot of things that we would like to update, and we would like to take direction to update in the bylaws, and we think someone with specialty knowledge in that could be helpful. That's all.
Can we move on to the next item?
So can we move on to item, I mean, I'm hesitant about doing a motion and a vote at this point. If we're going to amend bylaws, I can't see doing one little piece at a time. So I would like to move on to the next item, and maybe even have a small subcommittee of some of the policy committee members, since they are the policy board, of working on the bylaws, not just the staff, but having others involved on what those changes need to be for addressing and updating the new bylaws.
Madam Chair, can I just put to you that these have gone to CAC and TAC, both of which committees were invited to not only read through the proposed bylaw changes, but to submit any other suggestions to the staff, which have been incorporated. So it's not just the policy committee that has been looking at this.
Oh, I agree.
And I just wanted to make that clear to the public as well, and that we don't plan on acting on these bylaws today. This is just the introduction to the proposed bylaw changes. But I just didn't want anyone to misconstrue that this was being done purely by staff.
No, I agree. I know it's gone to TAC and CAC, and then the final vote will be policy after recommendations from TAC and CAC. But I don't want to vote on just one item at a time until the bylaws can be looked at as a total package. Sure. Work?
Yeah.
So I think we've discussed item 5D already.
Can I just
the
ask?
bylaws.
Well, Ryan is the staff member who has worked on that the most, and I don't know if he wanted to add anything to it, to the, okay, great, we're done, move on, yeah, thank you.
If we're going to do, let me just throw this out there, I think an ad hoc committee is a great idea, and we can use, I know we can use county legal. I would assume the city legal staff would also be willing to review whatever comes up. And then we go back to CAC and TAC again once we're there, and hopefully we can incorporate someone like Sarah on this committee because you have two hats on. But I would be happy to serve on that, and if we could get a sense of who it is now, we don't have to wait a month to assign people. But I would be happy to serve, and I don't know who else is, but we really need to do this. I have some really core questions about how we operate as an MPO.
Great. So we have Julie. Hopefully, we'll have MPO staff, county legal, city legal.
I'm happy to volunteer Andy.
Yeah, any proxies can volunteer there.
We could send an
Thank
email
you,
to
Andy.
request volunteers, since we do have a lot of proxies at this meeting today, too.
Yeah.
And I believe that Ellettsville uses a contract attorney, but we can extend the same invite to Town of Ellettsville, and if they would want to bring Ellettsville Council, that'd be great, too.
Yeah, I think it would be great if MPO staff could do a separate email over the next week or so to the policy board members, asking who would like to be on the committee. And then we move forward with that, and then they can start working with bylaws. And however, if they need to work with CAC and TAC, of having them involved also.
Perfect.
Madam Chair, do we have a notion of the timeline for doing this? I mean, as we proposed to the CAC and the TAC, we were trying to get any suggestions in by last Friday so that the staff could get it to us so that we could review it. And then CAC and TAC are meeting a week earlier than usual this month. And we were hoping to get everything through by next month, but it does not appear, if we're going to have a subcommittee, that will be feasible. So I'm wondering if we have a timeline that we might propose at this juncture so that we can determine by the end of the year, which would be November meeting. I'd like to have a clear definition of when we expect to complete this task.
So if you do the subcommittee, you'll have to amend the bylaws through a resolution? Would you have to go through that formality?
Do we have to do that to make a subcommittee?
I don't believe so.
No, not to make a
No,
I don't think to make one.
To amend the bylaws.
And would it take a 30-day
We have to go through.
requirement for publication?
We're required to go through a 30-day public comment period, which is the legal advertisement, much as what we do with the Transportation Improvement Program amendments, the work program adoption, and also the long-range transportation plan adoption. So the answer to that is yes.
So
We would have to go through a
would
comment
November
period.
be adequate time of coming up with?
Well, I mean, the staff's view is we're in no hurry. I mean, ideally, we would have wanted to have this happen before January 1st, so that way the new policy committee appointees coming in and TAC and CAC members would have a fresh start, so to speak. But as far as they're concerned, again, we're in no hurry. I mean, whatever it takes to get consensus, because that's what we're seeking is consensus. And shame on us to a certain extent in that we haven't looked at the bylaws in 10 years because it should have been updated considerably since then. Positions have changed. I mean, we've got identifications of representatives for positions here that don't exist anymore, have changed or have gone on or whatever. But yeah, I mean, our thing is achieving consensus. So that way the committees are in alignment and agree with everything.
I was like, come on. It seems like November seems ambitious. It seems possible, but it probably depends if you all want to form a subcommittee, great, and then how many people want to be on it, and how deep of a dive are we doing here. So I think it will really depend. Maybe after we have one meeting of the subcommittee, we could define it a little better at that point.
So possibly a thorough timeline a presentation in October of maybe a proposed timeline that we can make it feasible to do. Would that work?
We could
You would
work
have
on
a subcommittee by
We
then?
could work on a timeline, yeah.
And kind of
Yes.
work on a timeline for that. I know probably January doesn't work because we don't meet in December, and we're already here, we only have 2 meetings left for the remainder of the year, but if you could propose a timeline, at that point, you'll know who is on the subcommittee,
Okay.
working with TAC and CAC, and then provide us with a timeline for how we can amend the new bylaws.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Does that work? Does that work?
Madam Chair, point of
Oh,
order.
I'm sorry.
Just, we are still on an item that's listed under reports. This sounds like a discussion that can be completed behind the scenes, and it should be put onto old or new business where discussion is appropriate. If we could we go back to regular
Okay.
order and move to the next item?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 6, old business. Seeing none, we're going to move on to item 7. IU Health Bloomington presentation is done, so we will go to item B, the 2020-2024 TIP program amendments.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. And I have a second. All those in favor of approving the 2020 public comment.
Well, I mean, this is, you've moved to introduce it. Will it be explained, or is it just, are we going straight to a vote?
They can explain it.
Sounded like they were going straight to a
Don't have
vote.
to.
Well, this is where public comment is appropriate,
That's where I
isn't it?
just,
Okay.
yeah, if there was any public comment on these TIP amendments. Seeing none. All those in favor for approving the 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program amendments, do so by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, motion carries. I believe we've already discussed the State Road 45 follow-up. Communications from committee members, non-agenda items or topic suggestions for future agendas.
I just have one comment, and it's for Colonel Ferris. Thank you for taking the time to study some of our transportation and safety issues and bring them to our attention and cause what happened here today to finally occur, which was to bring IU Health before us and help us to understand what their transportation plans were. You spent a lot of time on that, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Upcoming Bloomington, Monroe County MPO meetings. Technical Advisory Committee will be meeting on September 18th at 10 a.m. in the McCloskey Room. Citizens Advisory Committee will be meeting September 18th, 2019 at 6:30 in the McCloskey Room. And noted, both of those meetings are a week earlier than normal. And the Policy Committee next meeting is October 11th, 2019 at 1:30 p.m. here in the council chambers. And do I have
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
And we are adjourned.